Greetings Warhammer enthusiast. Before you stands a voice assistant of the podcast, dedicated to spreading the greater good. If you find this information useful, please do not hesitate to leave a like and subscribe. Together, we shall explore the depths of the Warhammer universe and share in its wonders. In our prior segments, we've delved into the peculiarities of the Orkoid race and its individuals. This race, including the Orks, Gretchen, and Squigs, forms a complex, symbiotic ecosystem driven by a collective psychic field known as the War. In the eon-spanning chronicle of war that consumes the cosmos, Armageddon holds a grimly special place. It is a world where iron-grey skies meet towering, smog-choked hives, a desolate testament to the Imperium's unending demand for progress. Yet it is not the ceaseless churn of industry nor the bleakness of its landscape that marks its fame, but the monumental clash of forces that has seen its soil soaked in blood and littered with the debris of war. The Second War for Armageddon, as it has come to be known, was a struggle of cataclysmic proportions, an epoch-defining clash between the relentless forces of the Ork Warboss Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka and the stalwart defenders of the Imperium. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, a tale of ascension and bloodshed was unfolding, one that would ripple across the stars and ignite a war of unfathomable scale. This is the tale of Ghazghkull, a mere boy amongst the Ork armies on the distant planet of Uruk. The true inception of the war was not on Armageddon, but years before on the unforgiving lands of Uruk. On this stark, desolate world, the gears of fate turned in the form of an unexpected attack. An unidentified force of space marines, the valiant warriors of the Imperium, descended upon the planet, their mission to disrupt the burgeoning Ork force. It was in this cauldron of conflict that Ghazghkull suffered a grievous wound. A bolter shell, fierce and unrelenting, ripped into his skull, causing catastrophic damage and blasting away a sizable portion of his cranium. Salvation, or perhaps further damnation, came in the form of Mad Doc Grotznik, a notorious painboy in Ork ranks. A crude bionic device replaced the missing chunk of Ghazghkull's cranium, a testament to Grotznik's savage surgical prowess. The impact of this mechanical insertion was more profound than the physical trauma. It seemed to have unlocked Ghazghkull's latent psychic powers or incited potent delusions. Regardless, from this point forward, Ghazghkull claimed communion with the Ork deities, Gork and Morg. The transformation was rapid and profound. Within a handful of years, Ghazghkull rose from an injured boy to the commanding warboss of his tribe. Yet destiny was not done with him. The star around Uruk was dying, spewing lethal solar flares and bathing the planet in deadly radiation. Amidst this chaos, a colossal space hulk emerged in the planet's orbit. Ghazghkull seized this opportunity, rallying the disparate tribes under his rule and leading them to embark upon a great war. Their journey through the stars was far from smooth. Power failures plagued the space hulk, and the Ork forces found themselves repelling hordes of demons in the dark recesses of their ship. Yet, these challenges served only to harden Ghazghkull's warriors, turning them into seasoned fighters. As the Orks neared their destination, the Armageddon system, they unleashed an initial barrage of destruction. The defensive network of the system, including outdated orbital satellites and small attack craft, was swept aside by the might of the incoming space hulk. A desperate plea for aid was sent out into the void, with 3 Space Marine chapters beginning to mobilize their forces. Nevertheless, the Orks held the advantage of time. On a day of great significance in the Imperium, the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, the Orks set foot on Armageddon, marking the true beginning of the major phase of this infamous war. And thus, Ghazghkull's story of ascension from a lowly Ork boy to the harbinger of a devastating war serves as a grim reminder of the unpredictable turns of fate and the vast, bloody tapestry of the universe's never-ending conflicts. As the dust of the Ork landing settled on Armageddon, an ominous veil shrouded the system. A gargantuan warp storm spiraled into existence, a swirling tempest of raw chaos that effectively isolated the embattled planet from any hope of Imperial reinforcements. The Ork forces, an innumerable tide of green ferocity, divided into their 5 tribal configurations, 2 of which surged towards the northern reaches of Armageddon Prime. Unbeknownst to the green tide, a different kind of storm was brewing within the halls of power on Armageddon. Hermann von Straub, the overlord of Armageddon, stood stubbornly in the path of dire omens. Warnings, both mystical and mundane, poured in, the Emperor's tarot predicting doom, freighter captains whispering of unnatural warp disturbances. Yet, von Straub turned a deaf ear to these harbingers, his hubris blinding him to the impending catastrophe. It was only due to the foresight of Sebastian Yarrick that a distress signal managed to cut through the chaos, a beacon of desperation in the void. For his defiance, Yarrick was banished by von Straub to Hades' hive in Armageddon Secundus. Buoyed by a misplaced confidence, von Straub believed the planetary defense forces could repel the Ork onslaught. The denizens of Armageddon Prime rallied to their overlord's call, transforming their hive homes into makeshift fortresses. Despite their courage, the inexorable push of the Ork horde forced them into a perilous retreat. Von Straub, in his desperation, ordered piecemeal attacks that resulted only in greater human casualties. Yarrick, however, was not idle. He orchestrated daring shuttle runs to arm the northern defenses, with brave pilots skirting the planet's atmosphere to avoid Ork interception, a gamble that claimed many lives as their ships became flaming pyres plummeting back to the planet. Meanwhile, in Armageddon Secundus, von Straub hastily relocated his command center to Hive Tartarus, having resigned himself to the loss of the North. Yet, he remained blissfully ignorant of the 3 unaccounted Ork tribes. Under the assumption they were being held in reserve, he disregarded the warnings of Princeps Prime Curtius Mannheim, leader of the Iron Skull's Titan Legion. Mannheim advised caution and preparation for an attack from these unseen tribes, but von Straub was sure they would not dare cross the equatorial jungle region at the center of the peninsula. He remained stubbornly committed to his grand plan, a mighty counterattack that he would personally lead. Thus, on the beleaguered world of Armageddon, amidst the echoes of war and the storm-racked skies, an undercurrent of denial, defiance, and impending doom ran strong, setting the stage for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the Imperium. No sooner had von Straub made his decision than the Orks launched their attack on Armageddon Secundus. In a cosmic mockery of the strife below, the heavens roiled and churned as the many volcanoes of Armageddon awoke in fury. A season of shadows descended upon the world, black clouds billowing high and casting a grim pall over the war-ravaged landscapes. In the spectral gloom, the ground quaked as massive Ork armored columns rolled forth, piercing the thin Imperial lines like a crude dagger through parchment. With relentless momentum, 2 Ork tribes swung east of the imposing Palladus Mountains, converging on Hades' hive, while another force charged westward toward the crucial outpost of Port Hellsreach. In a desperate counter, von Straub called upon his mighty Titans under Mannheim's command. The Titan Princeps, cognizant of the peril his allies faced, marshaled the Legio Metallica and its Skitarii vanguard against the approaching storm of Ork forces. They were pitted against not only an ocean of Ork infantry but also towering Titan-class threats. In a duel of titanic proportions, Mannheim's steel hammer clashed with an Ork gargant, the confrontation ending with the sacrifice of the valiant Princeps. Commanding his critically damaged Titan to self-destruct, Mannheim's final act obliterated 2 additional gargants and seared a gaping wound in the heart of the Ork offensive. Reeling from this Pyrrhic victory, the remaining Imperial forces drew back, rallying along the many sinuous rivers of Armageddon, including the Styges River in the west and the Diabolus River in the east. Yet, as the ash-laden storms relented, the Ork juggernaut roared back into motion, storming southward, overrunning the defenses, and laying siege to Hive Infernus. The officer in charge, bereft of hope and spirit, surrendered without a fight, a decision that led to endless columns of refugees being hounded across the deserts by relentless Ork biker units. Like weary cattle, they were herded back towards Infernus, condemned to a grim existence of slavery under their brutal Ork captors. As the conflict raged on, the battle for Hades' hive took center stage. The hive was under relentless siege, setting the stage for some of the fiercest fighting of the war. At the heart of the resistance was Commissar Yarrick, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Seemingly omnipresent, he was as much a fixture on the front lines as he was in the back alleys, negotiating treaties with the disparate gangs of Hades' hive. Despite the bleak circumstances, Yarrick mustered an unlikely force to defend Hade's hive, a testament to his indomitable spirit. As Ork gargants bombarded the hive, its beleaguered inhabitants clung to survival, subsisting on rats and roaches, their lives dimmed by dwindling power supplies. It was a bleak chapter few chose to revisit, but those who did so with reverence for Yarrick's unyielding spirit. In a desperate attempt to stem the Ork advance, von Straub revealed his secret weapon, a cache of ancient virus bombs, a deadly inheritance from Armageddon's earliest colonizers. Hastily affixed to antiquated missile systems, these virus-laden projectiles promised a glimmer of hope. Yet, as with many things old and forgotten, reality fell short of expectation. The missiles malfunctioned, their once potent payload reduced to a whisper of its former virulence. The ensuing chaos sowed confusion in the Ork ranks, but fell disappointingly short of turning the tide. Disheartened and out of options, von Straub retreated to his bunker. Elsewhere, in Port Hellsreach, a resilient spirit arose from the despair. Inspired by the valiant defense of Hade's hive, its inhabitants rallied, mounting a fierce resistance. Street gangs, morphed into impromptu guerrilla fighters, lurked in the shadows, ambushing unsuspecting Orks. Converted super-heavy tanks served as makeshift evacuation vehicles, transporting civilians to docked ships. Amid the frenzy, desperate volunteers embarked on suicide missions, detonating explosives strapped to their bodies deep within the Ork lines. The defiance was so resolute that it gave even the Ork commanders pause. However, the Orks claimed a hollow victory when a devastating psychic attack rendered the human defenders mentally incapacitated, leaving the port ripe for invasion. As the stakes heightened, Ghazghkull mag Uruk Thraka himself entered the fray. The Ork Warboss set his sights on Hade's hive, orchestrating a barrage of strategic onslaughts, purportedly inspired by the Ork gods, Gork and Mork. Elite commandos were dropped onto the hive spires, gargantuan siege weapons were constructed, and gargants retrofitted with earth-moving devices were deployed. Yet, at every turn, Yarrick and his beleaguered defenders counteracted. Maintenance crews turned fighters scoured the ventilation shafts, eliminating the descending commandos. The hive's transport infrastructure was utilized for deceptive feints, while daring suicide squads targeted the looming siege weaponry. It was a dance of life and death, a testament to human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. As the relentless siege of Hade's hive endured, the Ork hordes marched south from Port Hellsreach and Hive Infernus, their monstrous columns setting a dire course for Hive Akron. The last citadel of humanity on Armageddon, Akron braced itself for the imminent onslaught. The beleaguered Acheronians watched helplessly from their ocular monitors, the slow, inexorable approach of the Orks a grim reminder of their impending fate. The only consolation offered by the absent von Straub was a pittance of 20 less favored members from his personal guard, and some empty well-wishes. The Orks, in their customary fervor, breezed past the outer hive and lay siege to the heart of Akron. The hive governor, a figure of unyielding resolve, rallied his people with a passionate speech. But it seemed as though his words would be swallowed by the Ork war cries. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath the Orks. A cascade of monumental explosions erupted amidst their ranks, hurling their vehicles into the air like toys in a cyclone. Akron watched in awe as a rain of destruction descended from above, the heavens alight with the glow of orbital bombardment. Ships filled the stratosphere, and thunderhawks dove into the fray, deploying the vanguard of a new force. The Orks, caught off guard by this unexpected intervention, recoiled in disarray as the legendary Space Marines entered the battle. Emboldened, Acheron's defenders joined the Space Marines, turning the tide of the war. It was the Orks' first taste of defeat on the battlefield. The Space Marines wasted no time in establishing their base of operations. To von Straub's protests of their intervention, the indomitable chapter master of the Blood Angels, Commander Dante, declared his command over all Imperial forces on Armageddon. Accusing von Straub of negligence, assassination, and murder, Dante ordered his arrest. However, von Straub slipped away, his land speeder later found wrecked, but the man himself remained elusive. Back in the north, Ghazghkull redoubled his efforts, rallying an ever-growing force to overrun Hade's hive. The relentless assault strained the hive to its limits. Food, once plentiful, had run out. Supplies meant to aid the north were now flowing south. A gloom hung heavy over the inhabitants of the hive, their spirits wilting in the face of overwhelming dread. Even the indomitable Commissar Yarrick struggled to keep morale afloat. In a daring strategic move, Dante risked a gambit to seize Ghazghkull himself, penetrating enemy lines and striking at the Ork leader's headquarters. Alas, Ghazghkull was absent, touring the front lines at the time. Nevertheless, the audacious raid dealt a heavy blow to the Ork spearhead. The battle to reclaim Tartarus Hive ensued, erupting into brutal hand-to-hand combat that marked some of the war's fiercest fighting. Space Marine strike forces ceaselessly harried the Orks within the hive, repelling their repeated breakout attempts, often by the thinnest of margins. Eventually, the Orks' reserves of food and ammunition dwindled to nothing, forcing them into a desperate last stand armed with nothing more than knives and rocks. They mounted a do-or-die assault against the indomitable Imperial forces. In the end, the Orks were exterminated to the last. It was rumored that Ghazghkull had met his demise, struck down by a bolter shell to his mechanical brain, but no trace of his body was ever found. By all accounts, the war seemed over. The invaders had been beaten back, their supposed leader slain, and half their army eradicated. The surviving Orks were herded back into the jungles. With the Imperial forces reclaiming Tartarus, victory seemed assured, and indeed it was. A relief force, featuring the might of all 3 Space Marine chapters, was dispatched northward to Hade's hive. Tragically, the hive was conquered just before their arrival. Merely a handful of humans survived within Hades, including the war-torn Commissar Yarrick, who stood triumphantly amidst a sea of Ork corpses. Meanwhile, to the west, a surge of Ork reinforcements swept in, aiming to recapture Tartarus and shatter the spine of Imperial resistance. The forces defending the western regions had been drawn away for the assault on Hades and were swiftly overwhelmed. Ghazghkull, who was evidently not vanquished, spearheaded the desperate bid to conquer the planet. They pushed past the Skeletus River, for a time appearing potentially victorious, but they were eventually repelled back to Armageddon Primus. After 12 grueling years, they were compelled to retreat to their ships and flee the system. Ghazghkull, having chosen to abandon his war efforts, managed to slip away using his own space hulk as a distraction. Meanwhile, in the northern regions of Armageddon Prime, the conflict escalated following the Space Marines landing in the south. As the warp storm finally dissipated, a formidable contingent of Abhumans, under the command of Inquisitor Horst, descended upon the north. Coming fresh from battle on the mining world of Golgotha, they were redirected to fortify the northern defenses upon their arrival on Armageddon. After the defeat at Tartarus Hive, Horst orchestrated a massive offensive with the Abhumans, driving the beleaguered Orks back to the jungles that divided Armageddon's territories. With the deployment of their renowned land trains, the Abhumans rampaged across the planet, their massive cannons laying waste to the Ork forces ahead. In spite of the staggering devastation wrought by the Second War for Armageddon, Ghazghkull remained unvanquished. In his view, the entire conflict served as little more than a rehearsal for greater conquests. As his grot, Makari, revealed, Ghazghkull had been plagued by incessant headaches and the relentless interference of Yarrick, leading him to relinquish his hold on the world. Yet, Armageddon would not know peace for long. In the ensuing decades, Ghazghkull would rise once again, this time at the helm of an even more formidable war. Boasting greater numbers, superior armament, and more rigorous organization, Ghazghkull's return signaled the dawn of a new era of conflict. And so, the stage was set for another clash, the echoes of the previous war still ringing loud in the hearts and minds of those who would stand in defense of Armageddon. The past and future intertwined, a testimony to the cyclical nature of war and the insatiable thirst for domination. Unbowed by his defeat in the Second War for Armageddon, Ghazghkull licked his wounds, rallied his hordes, and began preparing for his next campaign. Far from deterring him, the loss only sharpened his resolve. Ghazghkull saw the wisdom in the old adage, to conquer your enemy, you must first understand him. For him, the campaign on Armageddon served as a litmus test, revealing the ways in which the Imperium would react to a large-scale invasion. Yet, as his strategic acumen grew, so did a gnawing headache, a malaise that seemed to darken his ambitions. Amidst this internal struggle, Ghazghkull pondered his next move. Grotesnik urged him to return to Armageddon, a suggestion that appeared to flout the will of the gods who, it seemed, desired Ghazghkull to journey across the stars, uniting the Greenskin race. Even Makari, his trusted grot, sought to dissuade him from a second invasion of Armageddon and paid a temporary price with his life for his audacity. Ghazghkull, however, resolute in his resolve, chose to forge his own destiny, dismissing the gods' purported will, thus beginning the planning phase for a grander invasion of Armageddon. In the ensuing years, Ghazghkull entered an alliance with another influential Ork warboss, Nazdreg Ug, whose reputation was elevated by the galaxy's best mechboys in his service. Notably, Nazdreg's mechboys were famed for their mastery over teleporter technology, an asset Ghazghkull coveted deeply. Consequently, Ghazghkull negotiated an agreement with Nazdreg, promising to aid him against the Dark Angels during the Battle of Pisina IV in exchange for the prized teleporter secrets. Fresh from his engagement at Pisina, Ghazghkull set his sights on the Golgotha system. His aim was to seize this resource-abundant world and convert it into a colossal factory to fuel his second, ambitious war. Unbeknownst to the Ork warlord, Yarrick had pinpointed his location and was drawing near. Equipped with the teleporter technology, a gift from the ingenious mechboy Orkoids, Ghazghkull's forces overwhelmed the planet's subhuman planetary defense forces. Within a matter of weeks, the sheer might and numbers of the Orks, coupled with the destructive power of Ghazghkull's gargants, compelled the planet into surrender. However, just as Ghazghkull's victory seemed secure, Yarrick arrived on the battlefield. At the height of the battle, the intrepid Commissar commanded a squadron of formidable Baneblade super-heavy tanks, his sights set on eradicating Ghazghkull and leaving the Ork forces leaderless. Alas, even these titanic machines couldn't stem the tide of the beast of Armageddon. Yarrick's squadron fell to Ghazghkull's evil son's allies, and Yarrick himself was crushed under an Ork battle fortress. His unconscious body was hauled before Ghazghkull. In a surprising turn of events, Ghazghkull, after weeks of subjecting his old adversary to torture, decided that Yarrick's resilience was a source of too much entertainment to waste. He had Yarrick released from the squalid dungeons of his space hulk, seemingly desiring the indomitable Commissar's presence to provide him with another worthy challenge during his planned invasion of Armageddon. Nevertheless, Yarrick's indomitable spirit remained unbroken, leading to a daring escape from the clutches of the Orks. Upon his triumphant return to Imperial territory, an undying flame of vengeance ignited within him. The Orks had sown the wind, and they would now reap the whirlwind. Even though Ghazghkull had since vacated Golgotha, Yarrick wasted no time in orchestrating a fierce retaliatory campaign against the lingering Ork forces on the planet. A mighty force of Titans and Skitarii, the walking avatars of the Imperium's wrath and the cybernetic warriors of Mars, were rallied for the impending onslaught. Despite their combined might, the war was initially a harrowing affair for the Imperials, with victory seemingly slipping from their grasp. However, in the darkest hour, the Mechanicum, masters of arcane technology, constructed an imposing war engine known as an Ordinatus. This marvel of Imperial technology scoured the world, its unrelenting assault relentlessly purging the landscape of the Ork menace. The tranquility of the Armageddon sector was shattered by the ominous arrival of an Ork armada of colossal proportions, the dread-inducing vessels vastly outnumbering the Imperial fleet sixfold. Ork kill cruisers, vessels of utter destruction, performed reckless onslaughts against the Imperial Navy blockade protecting Armageddon, their indomitable tenacity overwhelming the skill and courage of the Imperial seamen. Amid the ensuing chaos, monitor stations echoed the warning of a looming threat. 3 more colossal Ork fleets were hurtling towards Armageddon. The union of Ghazghkull and his allies' fleets constituted an unprecedented assault, one the likes of which the Imperium had never seen before. With the Ork fleet descending upon the Armageddon system, Imperial forces under the stalwart leadership of Yarrick hastily prepared for the imminent onslaught. Reinforcements flowed onto the planet, comprising units from the Imperial Guard, the Collegia Titanica, the Sisters of Battle, and more than 20 heroic chapters of Space Marines. 6 weeks following their arrival, the Orks marked their assault with an apocalyptic barrage of rocks onto the planetary surface. Millions perished in an instant as Hade's hive, the site of Ghazghkull's previous humiliation, was utterly obliterated by a colossal asteroid, hurled from an orbiting Ork space hulk, in a revenge-driven act of utter destruction. This was followed by waves upon waves of Ork landing vessels. Despite the relentless counterattack from the Imperial Navy's aerial forces and ground defense lasers, the sheer magnitude of the Ork invasion was insurmountable. Simultaneously, Hive Hellsreach found itself under siege by hordes of Orks. The defenders, led by the formidable Reclusiarch Grimaldus of the Black Templars, bravely stood their ground, ensuring that each foot of ground ceded to the Orks was bought with rivers of green blood. Amidst this all-out war, the true purpose of the descending Ork rocks was revealed. These gargantuan projectiles, bristling with powerful force fields, served as colossal dropships. Once they landed, the rocks disgorged countless Orks and an unending stream of heavy equipment, teleported directly from orbit using teleporter technology, a macabre genius of the mech boy Orkimedes, Ghazghkull's inventive minion. This soon led to a grand spectacle of titanic warfare, with Imperial Titans and Ork Gargants clashing in a conflict that extracted a heavy toll from both sides. Furthermore, feral Orks, offspring of the Second War for Armageddon, erupted from the equatorial jungles to add to the melee. To add to the grim situation, Hive Akron fell to the Orks unexpectedly, claimed not through brute force, but treachery from within. Hermann von Straub, the infamous war criminal and the former governor of Armageddon, had plotted with Ghazghkull, overthrowing the Hive from within. Straub, whose ineptitude during the Second War had led to disastrous consequences, now reigned as the overlord of the captured Hive, a grim puppet in the hands of the Ork Warboss. The daunting task of protecting Armageddon from Ghazghkull's relentless aggression once again fell upon the shoulders of Commissar Yarrick. In this gargantuan struggle, Yarrick meticulously fashioned the planetary defense forces, and the Armageddon regiments into an indomitable machine of iron and steel. His old nemesis' presence on the battlefield ignited a renewed vigor in Ghazghkull, who intensified his assault, determined to shatter the backbone of Armageddon. Valuable aid came to Yarrick from various chapters of Space Marines, who recognized Armageddon's strategic importance. They meticulously established battle lines, repelling the Ork onslaught. Meanwhile, von Straub, the betrayer, met his end at the hands of a unit of penal legion troopers known as the Last Chancers. In a sudden twist of fate, the season of fire descended upon Armageddon, causing temperatures to soar so intensely that even the hardy Orks sought refuge within the hives. This harsh natural phenomenon led to a stalemate, providing much-needed respite for the Imperial forces. In the depths of the equatorial jungle, the battle raged on, with Imperial factions struggling to contain the Orks and halt their reinforcements from reaching Ghazghkull's hordes. Katishan regiments and Armageddon Ork hunters fought valiantly, purging the Ork menace from the western part of the jungle. However, their efforts in the east were less fruitful, with feral Orks continuing to flood into Armageddon Secundus. While the jungles resonated with the roars of battle, certain Imperial factions pursued their private objectives. The Relictus chapter, choosing to neglect calls for aid, deployed their forces in the equatorial jungle. Aided by Inquisitor Halstron, they sought Angron's monolith, a relic from the First War for Armageddon. In parallel, the Black Templar Solemnus Crusade hunted the Ork warboss Morkrol Grimskar deep into the jungle. Here, they clashed with a faction of Relictus led by Oberyn Uris. Though they failed to vanquish Grimskar, they discovered and subsequently closed a Chaos Warp Gate, left behind by the World Eaters during the First War. The Relictus objective, Angron's monolith, was finally located. Their quest for a fragment of the axe wielded by Angron himself during the First War was fulfilled. Having secured their prize, the Relictus withdrew entirely from Armageddon, leaving the others to continue the fight. It was by the shores of Ghazghkull Bay, site of a critical water processing plant, that the largest confrontation of dreadnoughts unfurled. Jerdrog Irontooth, an Ork warboss, had found his assault stymied. Desperate to break the impasse, he deployed every Def Dread and Killer Khan at his disposal against the Space Marine lines, which were already weakened from a previous commando attack. As the battered defenders stood their ground, Jerdrog's charge of dreadnoughts breached the perimeters surrounding Ghazghkull Bay. They were, however, caught off guard as they neared Gate 9. A formidable line of 17 venerable dreadnoughts, armed with las cannons, autocannons, and missile launchers, stood in their path, led by the stalwart brother Deimos of the Angels Porphyr. A devastating salvo tore into the front lines of the Ork dreads, inflicting significant losses. Undeterred, the Orks pushed forward, the cost of their 400-meter advance being 17 of their dreadnoughts. Yet, they persevered, relentlessly hurling themselves against Gate 9. Yet brother Deimos and his brethren were prepared. From their battlements, they poured devastating fire onto Irontooth's Orks, decimating the congested Ork dreadnought formation. As the Ork machines were bottlenecked, the Space Marine dreadnoughts, led by brother Wylands, carved into them. Despite their unyielding nature, the Ork machines ultimately succumbed. Jerdrog's audacious but unsupported assault had faltered. Forced to retreat under heavy Thunderhawk air strikes, and with his final reserves annihilated, the tide turned against Jerdrog. Yet the victory was not without cost for the Space Marines, who lost 7 of their 17 ancient dreadnoughts. Meanwhile, the increasingly static nature of the conflict wearied Ghazghkull. His patience dwindling, he brought back Makari, his standard-bearer, once more, this time engaging in direct conversation with him. He acknowledged some of his errors and showed Makari the holy war he had ignited on Armageddon, admitting it had potential for so much more. Just as Ghazghkull was revealing his introspection, a Layman Russ battle tank made a surprise appearance, punching a gaping hole through Ghazghkull's chest. His life was saved by the quick actions of Makari, who bravely infiltrated the tank to eliminate the crew within. Interpreting the event as divine intervention, Ghazghkull conceded his mistakes to Makari and the Ork gods, Gork and Mork. He declared his intention to abandon Armageddon to his generals and set forth on a new journey, Da Great War. News of Ghazghkull's departure reached Commissar Yarrick, who assembled a strike force of Black Templars and left Armageddon, resolved to hunt down Ghazghkull once and for all. They cornered Ghazghkull at the Battle of the Haunted Gulf, but the wily Warboss eluded them once again. Despite Ghazghkull's departure, Armageddon remained infested with Orks, and the war waged on. The Orks, relishing the incessant conflict, named it the Big Scrap, or the Ragnarok, and more Orks flooded into the system every day. The human cost of the war escalated into the billions, but the Imperials were unwavering in their determination. Armageddon must not fall. In the upcoming segments of this series, we will acquaint ourselves with other notorious Ork wars. To ensure you don't miss the release of these new episodes, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Stay tuned, and let's continue unraveling the intricacies of the Orkoid species together.